have it.
Hello and welcome to the program. I am Ekene Ndulwe. Beginning this week with financial matters, President Buhari has presented the 2023 budget proposal to a joint session of the National Assembly. This was his final budget presentation to the legislature as president.
Mr. President, on behalf of my distinguished and honorable colleagues, I welcome you and your entourage to the fourth joint session of the 9th National Assembly for the presentation of the 2023 Appropriation Bill. Mr. President, this joint session is going to be the last session for the 9th National Assembly to receive the budget estimates for consideration and passage. I will seize this opportunity to commend the 9th National Assembly and the executive arm of government for a very productive partnership and collaboration that have helped to ensure the return of the budget cycle from January to December. Your Excellency, last year, Thursday, 7th October 2021, you laid before this August Assembly the 2022 Appropriation Bill, which was the third in the life of this 9th National Assembly. Today, history is repeating itself. 7th October, the same date, 2022, as last year, you will be laying the 2023 Appropriation Bill. I commend you, therefore, for being timely every year in the last 3 years, to allow the National Assembly to work on the bill in good time for the new year. Mr. President, the 9th National Assembly has been consistent in passing the appropriation bill before the end of the year so that it can be signed into law before the beginning of the new year. It is a record that 2020, 2021, and 2022 appropriation bills were considered and passed before the end of the last 3 years. Distinguished senators and honor members are similarly committed to ensuring the consideration and passage of the 2023 appropriation bill before the end of this year by the grace of God. The benefits of the early passage and subsequent implementation of the budget have helped in the provision of infrastructure and other services across the country. Mr. President, our economy is still challenged by dearth of revenues. The main source of revenue to the Nigerian government is oil and gas. We always consider the diversification of our economy as crucial, and it is indeed crucial. The idea of deploying our revenues from the oil and gas to support the diversification into real sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, mining, etc. is now under serious threat. The large-scale and massive stealing of our oil is concerning, as this reduces drastically the revenues available to the government. With conflicting figures, projections have put our losses from this melee at between 700,000 to 900,000 barrels of crude oil per day, leading to about 29 to 35% losses in oil revenue in the first quarter of 2022. This represents an estimated total fall from 1.1 trillion naira recorded in the last quarter of 2021 to 790 billion naira in the first quarter of this year. The situation has worsened. Recently, the loss of our oil has reached 1 million barrels per day. Translated into monetary terms, our loss is monumental and deleterious. The figures show we are not able to meet the OPEC daily quota of 1.8 million barrels per day for our country. Mr. President, I consider the oil thieves the worst enemies of our country. The thieves have declared war on our country and our people. I strongly feel that we need to take the necessary measures to stop the thieves immediately. Otherwise, our economy will be completely devastated. Also, our efforts to provide the necessary infrastructure and diversification of the economy would both be thwarted. It is time to take drastic and desperate measures against the thieves. Mr. President, the situation becomes more unfortunate if we factor in the budget deficit estimated at 7 trillion naira and the green prospect of its increase to about 11.3 trillion naira as presented in the 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure framework fiscal strategy paper. Your Excellency, we can reduce the deficit by stopping the theft. We can also consider other options to source more revenues for government. I believe that it is imperative to review the waivers and concessions government has granted to the tune of 6 trillion naira. In a difficult time like this, some of these waivers may no longer be justified. In the same vein, we should consider taking off some of the major revenue-generating agencies from direct funding by placing them on cost of collection of revenues, as we did for Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS, Nigeria Customs Service. In this regard, agencies like Nigeria Post Authority, NPA, Nigeria Communications Commission, NCC, Nigeria Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, etc., can be given encouraging cost of collections of revenues. The National Assembly Committees on Finance and the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning should jointly look into this matter immediately. The condition will require courageous fiscal policy to redress by reducing the deficit, not just to avoid further increases in our debts, but to ensure macroeconomic stability, grow confidence in the system, and guarantee sustainable economic growth. The National Assembly will support policy frameworks geared towards prudence, transparency, and accountability through rigorous appropriation. Mr. President, this administration has been consistent in ensuring the delivery of landmark infrastructure across the country. The last 3 budgets have made generous provisions for different projects. While some have been completed, work on others are ongoing at high paces. The 2023 budget should therefore focus on completing a lot more of those projects. Mr. President, I strongly believe that the 2023 budget should target at completion of ongoing projects, especially our legacy projects. This not only because of the importance of infrastructure to the stimulation of economic activities, but also to entrench the efforts as a legacy of this administration. Our focus on this sector has been exemplary, and the benefit to our growth and development cannot be overstated. Mr. President, we note the government drive to address the impact of climate change and reverse its effect. Though complicated and dynamic, we should not rest on our oars in dealing with issues like floods, drying wetlands, desertification, and coastline erosions. The menace of flooding in many parts of our country has been particularly worrisome. It has devastated homes and disrupted families, lives, and livelihoods. We will need to take proactive measures to tackle this, and especially manage our dams and other water bodies to curtail the menace of flooding now becoming a national disaster. Our focus and targets should be on how to prevent these annual floods from occurring in the scale that we experience annually. This year, the floods have not only devastated families, but also destroyed our infrastructure, roads particularly. Mr. President, as you may be aware, work on the renovation of the National Assembly has begun in earnest. This is why we are in this temporary facility. Government should ensure timely completion of the renovation of the National Assembly complex because of the significance of this arm of government to good governance and the sustenance of our democracy. Aside from the National Assembly, by the way, Mr. President, let me thank you very much. When we approached you with my brother, the Honorable Speaker, about the need to rehabilitate and renovate this National Assembly complex, you did not waste any time. You gave the marching order to then Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari, that sources of funds must be identified to immediately start the renovation. Aside from the National Assembly complex and chamber, there are also the National Assembly Service Commission complex, the National Assembly Library, and the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies complex. These projects are integral to the smooth functioning of legislative work, which is why we will need to pay attention to the completion of those projects. Mr. President, from the assessment of the prevailing situation, our security agencies are recording more successes and the situation is improving. In pushing for concerted efforts toward ridding our nation of criminals, the National Assembly will continue to support the executive arm of government in finding permanent solutions to insecurity in our country. Let me at this point commend our defense and security forces for working harder. There is still some work to be done though. Mr. President, be rest assured that the single senators and honor members of the 9th National Assembly will once more begin work on the 2023 budget immediately. As usual, we shall be guided by an utmost sense of duty, responsibility, equity, fairness, justice, and patriotism in the interest of posterity. On this note, it is now my singular honor and privilege to invite His Excellency, Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federation, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, to present the 2023 budget estimates to the joint session of the National Assembly. Thank you all for your kind attention. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I don't want us to jump the gun. Okay. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Okay. He has submitted his proposal. Okay. Let's go. We will have to go and unveil and open that proposal. He brought in the box. You saw the box. We want to go and open the box, look at it, read it very well, all right, and then try to analyze what's in there before we begin to, suggest anything. We don't want to put the cart before the horse. So, all these questions, we will give you answers when we unveil, when we open that box, when we see what is in there. So we will give you the answers. But for now, I'm constrained. Let me tell you one fact. There isn't, I've never seen any government. I've been a participant in the budgetary process since 1999. That is when we started our new journey. Our new journey in terms of the democracy we are enjoying in this country. I was one chairman House Committee on Appropriations, and even when I left office, I was really following what was happening. There's no government in the history of this country that has invested so much in infrastructure. The government has done very well. It has performed in a manner that we need to commend it. So what the President said is in tandem with the actual performance. So it's commendable. All we need to do is to continue on where the government will stop next year. It's a long journey. Before you achieve economic buoyancy, there must be the enabling environment. And infrastructure is one of the fundamentals needed. And we are moving towards that, even though it's quite unfortunate that we had series of devastation due to flooding. this time around, which is something that is applicable to all parts of the world. But we will continue to advise that measures should be taken in the way that we must be always proactive in dealing with those situations. We don't have to wait until something occurs before we begin to look for a remedy. But we should take actions, create waterways, create drainages in a manner that when even you have too much rainfall, there won't be much devastation. But overall, this government has performed very well.
So, distinguished President Muhammadu Buhari has just given his final budget presentation as President. Just give us your initial assessments or observations to his presentation earlier.
Well, good morning. Well, this is part of our annual ritual actually here at the National Assembly for us to expect the President to come and lay the budget and also present his hopes and budget for the following year. But I haven't listened to it. I think it's a challenging budget. Let's be honest with ourselves. There's a lot of fiscal challenges in terms of revenue, in terms of oil pipeline vandalism. And added with the global economic challenges that we have. So it's a budget that we are going to look at thoroughly and try and see how we can augment our revenue side in meeting some of the needs and expenses that are needed. Obviously, the issue of oil subsidy is still a major critical issue, which he too acknowledges is not sustainable, which we have always said that, obviously. And but I know that he's also concerned about the fallout of it, especially for the masses. So these are some of the things that we're going to look at. But overall, it was a good presentation, and we are looking forward to deliberating and taking a deeper look into the budget.
All right, and like I said, this is Mr. President's final budget presentation to the legislature. How would you assess his general outings over the past, let's say, 3-4 years?
You have to give it to President Buhari. I mean, he's he's a statesman par excellence. He's very dignified, and also you can also see his years of military training. It shows in even the way he walks and his discipline. So in terms of his outings, I mean, you can never fault his outing. He's always very well prepared. You can see that the speeches, he was able to read them fluidly. So in terms of his presentation, I think he's lived up to the expectations of Nigerians and what we really do expect from our head of state.
And in the lead-up to President Buhari's 2023 budget presentation, the Senate passed the 2023-2025 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy Paper and adopted 3.6 trillion naira for petroleum subsidy for 6 months in 2023.
Presentation of the report on the 2023-2025 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy Paper by the Chairman, Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Solomon Adeola. The framework pegged daily crude oil production at 1.69 million barrels per day for 2023 at $73 per barrel, higher than $70 presented by the executive. The committee had recommended 1.7 trillion naira for fuel subsidy for 2023 against the 3.6 trillion for 6 months presented by the executive, but the committee's recommendation was rejected.
It is clear that there are general uncertainty regarding the basis of estimating of subsidy cost, including the daily consumption volume.
If you cut it from 3.6 to 1.7, right, and it's for the entire year, you could reach a point at which you could have maybe a supplementary budget or whatever it is.
The petroleum subsidy. This is not realistic, Mr. President.
Senate recommended that the 10 out of 63 government-owned enterprises be placed on cost of collection. These include the Nigerian Communications Commission, Federal Inland Revenue Service, and the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board. The legislators urged the Minister of Works and Housing to address the deplorable condition of roads in Ekiti and other parts of Nigeria. This followed a motion by Senator Olubunmi Adetumbi.
The alternative Ilawe Igbaraoke road suffered a bridge collapse recently due to overuse.
Kogi East has been virtually cut off from the state capital, Lokoja.
Just Abuja here, Yanya, to Mararaba and all the way to Kefi. The problem is the same.
So why are we not developing our bitumen sites? So we can use this bitumen to be able to maintain our roads.
The Ministry of Works and the Minister of Finance in this budget presentation to actually focus more on rehabilitation.
The bill seeking to establish the Nigerian Industrial Development Authority, which seeks to accelerate Nigeria's industrialization, sponsored by Senator Sani Musa, the National Center for Women Development Act Amendment Bill, sponsored by Senator Betty Apiafi, and the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa Niger State Establishment Bill, sponsored by Senator Bima Inagi, passed second reading.
It will build up industrial infrastructure, prioritize power for industrial use,
and rename the center as the Mariam Babangida National Center for Women Development.
The State College of Agriculture, Mokwa, which will be upgraded to the proposed university.
To ensure the availability of petroleum products in the country, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has taken some measures to address issues surrounding the oil and gas sector. Group General Manager of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, made this known at an interactive session with the Senate Joint Committee on Petroleum Downstream Resources and Upstream.
The interactive session is one of many by the Senate and other relevant stakeholders on issues bordering on the nation. The crux of this engagement here rests with the NNPC to clarify on pertinent issues relating to crude oil theft, subsidy region, rehabilitation of refineries and gains of the Petroleum Industry Act.
The purpose of the meeting was to interact with the NNPC and get answers to some critical questions.
The Group Managing Director of the NNPC Limited briefed the committee on the issues raised.
Just 3 days ago, Mr. Chairman, we found a connection by the help of these private contractors that were put in place, running 4 kilometers from our major trunk Focados line into the sea, 4 kilometers into the sea, and with a loading port that has probably operated in the last 9 years, Mr. Chairman.
9 years.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And if this is just one, I do not know how many more are there, Mr. Chairman.
What are those things that Nigerians that will be alive tomorrow will benefit from this transition from PIB to PIA?
Since the passage of the PIA, distinguished Chairman, so many decisions were easily met. Compliance became an issue, and we tried everything possible to comply with every regulation.
It's either we take a position at the National Assembly and make all theft a capital offense. Yes. It's how we take that position. So these are some of the recommendations we'll be sending.
Well, it's on that note that we conclude this episode of Senate 109. Till next week, I am Ekene Ndulwe. Thanks for your time and see you again soon.